Okay, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, we began on Sunday morning and talked a little bit about the first few verses in dealing with, again, the idea that we can't really know what's ahead. In this specific instance, it talked about whether it would be loved or hated, or whether we would be loved or hated. We can't know. And again, the overall point is just that no matter how much wisdom we may acquire or gain, there are limits to what we can really truly know and understand. And again, to go back to what we said before in the earlier parts of this book, the only one who knows everything that has transpired and will transpire is God, and therefore we ought to put our trust and our lives in His hands, since He knows what the future holds, and He can help us through whatever we might face. And so we talked a little, I think, on Sunday morning as well about the difference between God knowing all of those things and necessarily being responsible for them taking place. Those are two different things. The one is definitely true, that God knows all things, past, present, and future. Even knows the choices that we will make, which brings up the really fun discussion of, well, if God already knows the choices I'm going to make, then there's not really freedom of will. And the working to reconcile both of those ideals together. God's foreknowledge does not mean that He has essentially locked everything into place and no choice can be made differently. It just means that God knows that we're going to make a different choice. He knows what those choices are going to be. He knows ultimately the day of our death, and all of those things are known to Him, even though we haven't made all of those choices yet. So another theme that's been repeated throughout this book, we're kind of getting toward the end of the book, and so a lot of these themes have recurred already multiple times. But another one's found in this next section, the repeated statement of what happens to all of us, regardless of our station or status in life. We die. I mean, that's the reality, is that we're all on a date with death. Sounds morbid, but it's just the reality. I mean, that's just the reality of things, that because of the world that we live in, from the moment we drew our first breath, we were on our way toward death. And so we don't know when that time is going to come. And so the most that we can do, and it's part of what he talks about in this passage, he compares a living dog with a dead lion. Why does he say that a living dog is better than a dead lion? And again, you got to deal with these statements in the context. Why is a living dog better than a dead lion?
The Bible talks about dogs eating scraps and kind of scrounging around, and so I think it's talking about, being alive and scrounging and barely scraping by is better than being dead but mighty.
Okay. And I mean, you're right. I mean, again, the comparison is in this particular context with the fact that one's dead and therefore can do what? Nothing. The other one's alive, albeit perhaps a less than ideal existence in some cases. That is, I think, is the way that he's looking at it. I think Liz's way of thinking about this passage is right. Less than an ideal existence, and yet he's still alive and therefore can do something. So it's better to be alive. And he then takes that analogy and talks about that the one who is living has what? Speaking of people now, has hope. Why? Why does the one who is alive have hope? I mean, I don't know about your life. There have been times it's felt kind of hopeless. So what's his point?
There's more yet to come.
Okay, I mean, there's always the possibility of a brighter day, and if we trust in God, which ultimately is the conclusion of the whole book, then what can we certainly hope for? And biblically speaking, that is a confident expectation. We're all going to die, but once we all die, we're not all going to what? Huh? We're not all going to die again. If we are in Christ, if we follow God, if we fear God and keep His commandments, there's hope of life after death. And for the Christian, that's what we ought to be longing for. Not that we ought not to enjoy the things of this life, and he talks about that throughout this book. In fact, part of it's here in this text, right after he talks about the living have hope. But ultimately, no matter how bad things get here, there's still hope of life beyond this one. And so the living have hope. There's always the choice. There's always this opportunity. We sometimes talk about people who are unfaithful or have not yet obeyed the gospel. And a statement I've heard by members of the older generation, which includes my generation, is as long as there's life, there's what? As long as there's breath, there's hope. And so we cling to that. As long as someone who has not yet obeyed the gospel or is not faithful to the Lord is still alive, there's still the hope, there's still the opportunity for them to return to fellowship with God, or to seize it in the first place, and therefore to have the blessings that God longs for them to have. So anything else about that? I guess it's probably about the first 6, 7, 8 verses or so. Okay, beginning in that middle section of this chapter, he talks about some keys to life. Really, I put down verses 9 through 12, but it kind of begins in verse 7. What should we do with the life that we have for as long as we have it? We're all on a date with death. We've already established that. So in the meantime, just be miserable because life is a vanity and like chasing after the wind. No, we should enjoy it. And there's some specific things he tells us to enjoy. What? And that's where I said we really could go back to verse 7. Enjoy what?
Food.
Enjoy your food. I like my food. I enjoy eating. It's one of my favorite pastimes. I'm glad it's required to stay alive because it's pretty good. I enjoy it. And I eat well, which is nice. So eat your food. Enjoy the blessings that you have, the simple blessings. And I do think that's important for us to recognize, is that there are, I think, especially in our culture, there are things that we tend to take for granted. Most nights, Ashley has to decide what she's going to make. And we don't think about that too much. She decides what we're going to have ahead of time, gets the ingredients for that, and then on the given night that she's planned that, or on a different night if something comes up and that meal's going to take too long, she'll swap things up. And those are things we, I think, take for granted, the variety that we get in our diet, because that's just the way it's always been. I mean, from the time I was a kid, my grandmother did that in our house, and then Dawn did it when she and I were married, and now Ashley does that for the most part in our house. Occasionally the kids will cook a meal and does a good job because they've got a good teacher. But we take for granted the variety that we have. I've talked about before, we take for granted I had to figure out what to put on tonight. It wasn't like I have one Wednesday night outfit. I can wear a whole bunch of different ones. And if we're not careful, we begin to just take those for granted, and not really to think about the blessing that it is. And so being thankful for the variety of food that we have and the blessing that it is to be able to pick and choose, as opposed to just, we've talked about our brethren in Zimbabwe, and there are long periods of time where all they get is mealie meal. I don't know what mealie meal's like, but I know for the most part, most of us in America get tired of anything after having it for a while. I know the Israelites got tired of eating the manna for 40 years, and that came directly from heaven. But we're people who like variety, and get tired of having the same things over and over again. But if that's all you've got, and it's a choice between not eating and having that, the guy I was working with today, Joey, was talking about his grandfather growing up during the Depression, and after he became an adult and was old enough that Joey knew him, he told him, "If I never eat another potato in my life," he said, it'll be too soon. And the reason was because during that period of time, that's about all they had to eat. And so he said they would grow potatoes, and then they would cut the top off of some of them and throw them back in the ground and grow some more potatoes, and that's what they ate all the time. And he got tired of them. But I can guarantee you, when they were eating them then, it was a question of either going hungry or eating potatoes. And you got to go hungry, you'll eat potatoes. I don't care how tired you get of them. But so just recognizing the blessings that we have, I think is helpful for us to realize and to understand and to give thanks for the fact that we are blessed in that way. And so he says, "Eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do." Blanket statement, right? I mean, whatever we do, God approves of it. Yeah. God's okay with whatever we choose. I mean, he's going to later tell us, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Is he telling you, it doesn't really matter what you do, but whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability. Is that what he's saying?
In verse 8, he tells you the restrictions on it.
Yeah, let your garments be always white. Ashley got a little bit of a chuckle out of that, because if we read that literally, what do we think? Oh, well, Navy's not in, it's all white. We used to wear white all the time. But I mean, again, this is a metaphor telling us to live purely before God, and let not oil be lacking on your head. And that was, again, the anointing oil or different oils that they used during those time periods. Again, were a blessing from God. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you talk about eating potatoes.
Yes.
That brought back some memories. When I was growing up, we had beans and potatoes one day, and potatoes and beans the next.
That was the variety. That's right. So, and again, my grandparents talked about some of those kinds of days, but I said, my family was not well off when I was growing up, but it was nothing for me to come home from school, and before we ever had dinner, my grandmother had fried chicken breast sandwiches for my brother and I to eat for a snack. I mean, we're talking big chicken breast for a snack, and a fresh baked apple pie. That was a snack before she ever worked on dinner. And my grandfather was paralyzed from the waist down for the last 25 years of his life. She took care of all that, took care of the house, and had the energy, or at least found the energy, for years to cook meals every day for our whole family and make that kind of a snack fairly frequently for my brother and I. I mean, she was just amazing. But I mean, those are things we ought not to take for granted, and it becomes easy for us to. I mean, I have an app on my telephone. I can change the temperature in my house. from here. And again, not everybody, people talk about, I remember what it was like. We didn't have air conditioner growing up. I have no idea what that's like. I'm not sure I could live without air conditioner now. I'm not sure I want to try. But, there were generations of people who knew. So, air conditioning, having the ability to control the climate in our house so that it's comfortable, that is a benefit and a blessing we ought not to take for granted, and we ought to be thankful for. Any of those things that make our life pleasant, that are not in and of themselves sinful, are things that we ought to take joy in and be thankful to God for, and to enjoy them for the blessing and the benefit that they are. Verse 9. This is one of those verses that's my favorite. It's here, it's in Proverbs, it's all over the place. I love this verse. Gives me an excuse to go anywhere I want with my wife anytime I want. My favorite place to be. What does it tell me? He's probably right. What does it tell me? Verse 9. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain. It's so interesting sometimes the way these phrases are. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun. It's like enjoy, and it's vain. So I think it's just keeping us real and helping us to understand. We enjoy those things, but again, are they in and of themselves the answer to the question of what the meaning of life is? That's the thing about being a Christian. There are a lot of fringe benefits that come with being a Christian that are not in and of themselves the goal. The goal of life is not for me to enjoy life with my wife. The goal of life is for me to glorify God. And one of the benefits of doing that is that when we both seek God and put Him first in our lives and therefore in our marriage, that one of the benefits of putting God first is that we have a life that is enjoyable for us to share together. Even though life itself is vain and like chasing after the wind, if that's all we're really seeking after. But there are lots of things to be enjoyed, and when we put first things first, that's one of the results. I've said before, people say God would want me to be happy. I say your happiness is not really God's main goal. Your main goal is is holiness. God's goal for you is holiness. But I do believe that, again, a benefit of living a life of holiness is that we're able to find joy, sometimes in the midst of some rather unusual circumstances. But again, the pursuit of happiness is not the goal. The pursuit of wisdom is not the goal. But I will tell you, if you pursue God and you hunger and thirst after His Word, will it make you wise? Scripture says it will. So you'll gain wisdom. Will you find peace and joy and happiness and all those other things that people are seeking after in all the wrong ways? Again, Scriptures promise you will. That there will be peace and that you'll have joy. Peace that passes understanding. Philippians chapter 4, verse 7. But we're not pursuing peace, we're not pursuing joy, we're not pursuing happiness, we're not pursuing those things for the sake of pursuing them. We're pursuing God, and then in turn, God, through His mercy and grace and His desire to bless us, provides us with these other blessings and benefits. So, enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that He has given you under the sun. Because, he says, that is your portion in life and in your toil, in which you toil under the sun. Then he says in verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, I already said this one once before, but let's talk about it. Do what? Do it with all your might. I want us to talk about that a little more specifically. I mean, obviously the words are straightforward and it's pretty simple to understand. What does that look like?
Give it your all.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you do, whatever, and again, this is not a blanket statement that just anything you choose to do. I mean, everything is couched with the understanding of the person of God is going to seek to do things that are godly. But the point is simply, whatever you put your mind to accomplish, whatever task you set out to do, it doesn't matter how big or how small that task is. We have a tendency sometimes to focus on the big tasks. We want to really nail things out in this area, or maybe things that we feel like are more important. I mean, if I'm going to change the oil in my wife's car, I'm probably not going to do that haphazardly, where I leave the plug in the oil pan a little loose, or maybe the gasket or the seal on it not very tight. I've only got a couple quarts of oil. I know it says 4.5, but 2 will be enough, won't it? And so just kind of I'm not going to do that job haphazardly. But the point that he's making in this text is what? The child of God, the Christian, the one who fears God and keeps his commandments, should do what? But what? Changing my wife's oil? Building a house? Mowing somebody's yard? Angie's shaking her head. She's just going to, and I can keep adding to this list, and Angie's just going to keep shaking her head. Because she's right. I mean, yes, go ahead.
Well, I think there may also be an element of improvement. If you're doing something with all your might, if you're trying to do your best, you want to do better every time you do it again.
Yes.
To be content with good enough and leave it that way is not as good, I think he's saying, as trying to do it a little better or find a way to improve the process or the task each time. And if you think about hobbies that people love hobbies because they love developing and enriching that skill.
Right.
You start learning to knit, and maybe you make a square the first time you do it, and then, well, now I want to make a little sweater, maybe a baby blanket, and then you graduate to more and more advanced projects.
Right.
And that's fun, but we ought to have the same mentality with things maybe that aren't so fun.
Right.
But how can I do this better? How can I improve this skill and exercise this so that I can do it to the best of my ability?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing duct cleaning now for almost 3 years. I'd like to think that I do a better job duct cleaning today than I did when I first started. Not because I was trying to shortchange people when I first started, but because I know a lot more about it, and I have developed some tools that make it more efficient over the course of my time. So, I mean, Andrew's right. Not only are we trying to put all of our effort into it when we're doing it, but as we continue to do those things, we ought to be improving upon the effort that we put on it before. Not because we're going to put more effort into it, but because we know more about it and our ability to do the job has improved. And I think he's right. I think it's at least implied in the text. But the point is, no matter what you do, I remember this story from years ago. Bill Bryant was preaching for us in Paris, Kentucky when we were there in the late 90s. And he talked about this kid who was in high school who worked at McDonald's. And he talked about the fact that he would go to McDonald's and this kid would serve him. And when he brought his tray out, he said it always just looked so nice. And he said, your tray always looks like it's almost like Martha Stewart taking time to prep a plate for showing on a TV show. And he's like, why? And he said, I take Colossians seriously. I think everything I do ought to do for the Lord and to His glory, even if it's just putting food on a tray at McDonald's. That's the mindset we're talking about, is trying to do whatever you do. And I mean, that's what he says. whatever your hand finds to do. That's why Angie was just going to sit here and keep shaking her head. Everything I added, she's just going to be like, yep, that one too. Yep, that one too. I don't care what it is. Changing a baby's diaper? Yep, that one too. I mean, it doesn't matter. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. That one we take a little more seriously because we don't want accidents. but I mean, the point is just whatever task you're helping with, however menial somebody else might consider it to be, or however important it might be. It doesn't matter. That doesn't change our response to the work that's set before us. And so we try to do everything we do to the best of our ability because ultimately, and that Colossians talks about the fact that we do it as to the Lord. Why is that important? I mean, use my duct cleaning analogy again. If I got invited to go clean the ductwork for the Lord, what kind of effort do you think I'm going to put forward for that? What kind of effort do you hope I put forward for that? The best I've ever done, right? So what should I do every time I go do a duct cleaning? Whether it's for the Lord, he doesn't have duct work, I'm pretty sure. Or not, what should I do? I should do my best. I mean, we should always do our best. And yeah, we have rough days where we don't have quite the energy output, or maybe the mental capacity that we have on other days when we're a little fresher. But, I mean, all I can do today is what? We say this to people all the time. Do we believe it? All I can do is my best. My best may not be your best. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be my best. And so we put our best effort into everything that we do. That's what we're called to do. We can talk about we can argue about how realistic that is or how well we're doing with it. I really love Tim Crawford's questions because he makes us think about that kind of thing. You know, you can complain about the impossibility of the task. The reality is what you ought to be asking yourself is, how well am I doing with that? Because that's what Scripture teaches. So how well am I doing with that? How well am I applying that idea to my life? Jim?
Yeah, we have to be careful not overemphasize that all. Because some people take that too far and they become a workaholic. But
Yes.
with that, Galatians 6, where it says temperance is a fruit of the Spirit. And so many times the word all comes up. Sometimes it has to be qualified. Other times it means exactly what it says. You see it in the context.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. I mean, there are people who would take that and allow it to make them work nonstop all the time. And that's certainly not what he's saying. And we know that, again, in the immediate context of this book, because he's talked about the importance of keeping life organized and recognizing the importance of hard work and the benefits of hard work, but not pouring ourselves into our work for the sake of working or even justifying it by, well, whatever my hand finds to do, I should do it with all my might. And that means I should just keep at it nonstop all the time. So, yeah, I mean, there is balance that needs to be had with it. But when we do a task, the point is in this passage, do the best you can do. Yes, sir.
I think part of the reason that is good wisdom is when you pour your effort into it, you feel good about the outcome.
You do.
I had a guy years ago that at work was just underperforming, and he hadn't worked for us long. And we went to him, we asked him, we said, why do we see this?
Right.
He said, well, I just don't feel like I'm getting paid well. If you paid me better, I'd try harder. To which we said, well, if you tried harder,
We pay you more.
pay better.
Right.
And so we parted ways pretty quickly with that guy.
Right.
And when you look at the rest of this verse, it says, whatever you find, do it with all your might, because there's no work in the grave.
That's right.
You don't want to say, well, I'll do my best work later.
Right.
Develop your skills and do them to the best of your ability now.
Now's what you got. I mean, now's the time that you got. And there. Not only is there no work in the grave, there's going to come a time. I've talked to a few older people now. Recently, I had customer that was talking about, yeah, we're older now and I can't do some of the stuff I used to be able to do. I said, I just hit half 100 this year, and there's already a lot of stuff I can't still do. Some of it I can't do at all. Some of it I can't do the way I used to do it. And that's the reality of life. So again, do the best you can while you can. And then when you get older and can't do it quite as well, do the best you can where you are then. And then when you can't do it at all, do something else with all your might. Yes, sir.
Not only does it say that about work, the point Aaron made about don't put it off, the verse also says there's no devising in the grave, or some translations say planning.
Right.
I mean, think of that with other things in your life too. You know, if you have a goal or a plan for something, don't put it off, or
Right.
then you're not going to have the chance to fulfill that if that's a thing you want to pursue.
Yeah, there's no guarantee it's going to come, that you're going to reach that time that you've set aside for that plan. And yeah, I mean, Andrew's right. It says, whatever your hand finds to do. Well, you know, 11 years ago, Ashley and I chose to get married. So that was something my hand found to do. So what should I do as a husband?
Be the best.
Be the best husband I can be. However pitiful that is, I mean, all I can do is my best. So you do the best that you can at whatever your hand finds to do. I could say the same thing about being a father. I have 5 children and haven't been perfect at raising any of them. But all I can do is the best I can do. And I haven't always done that, and haven't always done that in my marriage. There are lots of areas we fall short. But all we can do is realize the need that we have to pour ourselves more deeply into the tasks that are at hand, and do them to the best of our ability. And so it really does fit across the board, not just with work. Be the best friend you can be. If you're going to be a friend to somebody, be the best one you can be. So, yes.
I think there's also a balance that he kind of hints at, because in verse 9 he says, live joyfully.
Yes.
And then in verse 7 and 8. And then in verse 10 he says, whatever you do, do it with your might. And we always have to remember that we can't constantly be looking for the next thing. We have to live joyfully where we are, but do everything with our best might. We have to find that balance. Don't constantly be like, oh, we'll have kids, we'll start a family once I get a promotion.
Right.
We'll do it once we get a bigger house, once we get a minivan, and then suddenly you're 42 years old and you can't have kids.
Right.
Or whatever it might be.
Right.
You know, oh, I'll marry you once we graduate. Oh, I'll
Right.
marry you once I make partnership. Like things
Right.
like that. You have to do your best in the moment, but also remember to enjoy life.
Yes. Well, and I thought maybe you were going a different direction with it. I mean, all that you said was true. But the other thing is everything that our hand finds to do joyful? Does it all bring us joy or happiness or pleasure? No, but can it still be just as essential? Those things that don't really bring us much joy or bring anybody else around us joy, those we should just kind of half-hearted effort, right? Nope. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. So it doesn't matter what it is, whether it brings you joy. I mean, this is one of the things we talk about with our kids. Well, I don't feel like it. Yeah, you know what? There are lots of days we don't feel like doing a whole lot of things. And yet there are things that need to be done. And so as children of God, we keep doing them to the best of our ability anyway, because we want to glorify God and we want to accomplish the things. And Aaron's right. Giving your best effort, you can go home and lay your head down on the pillow at night and rest easy because you know you did a good job. You didn't just kind of half do it, and now you're laying in bed thinking about, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. And there may be occasions where you give the best effort and you still recognize later there are things, oh, I should have taken care of this. But again, that's about growing and improving, not about just cutting corners so we can get it done faster and then not having the sense of accomplishment that comes with doing a good job. Okay, so I had enjoy life with your wife, eat your bread with gladness, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Anything else?
Do you find it ironic that Solomon makes it singular wife? No, in this book, he said,
It is kind of interesting.
wife.
That's a good point.
I mean, he had
He had,
700 wives.
yeah, he had multiple wives. I mean, what he had doesn't even, I don't know, it's in a whole category to itself. But it is ironic. I didn't even think about that, but it is ironic that he says, enjoy life with the wife whom you've chosen, which that is interesting. So appreciate you bringing our attention to that, because I hadn't really noticed that at all. Okay, anything else about that? Because now we're going to get to one of Aaron's favorite verses.
I think they tie together. Enjoy your wife, and do whatever you do it your might.
Yes.
Because this next section,
Right.
you know, there's no guarantee. The guaranteed victor is not always the victor.
No, I mean, it really is. Verse 11 beginning, again, I observed this on the earth. The race is not always won by the swiftest. The battle is not always won by the strongest. Prosperity does not always belong to those who are the wisest. Wealth does not always belong to those who are the most discerning. Nor does success always come to those with the most knowledge. Okay, so are those true statements? Things you can observe in just looking at the world around you. Oh yeah, we like to root for the underdog, don't we? And when we talk about the underdogs, we're talking about the Davids versus the Goliaths. So we even use terms like that in sporting analogies. Oh, it's David versus Goliath today. And you know, a lot of people root for the underdog. They want the underdog to win. And they're the underdog, why? Because they're not supposed to win, because they're not what? Was David the strongest? Was he necessarily the wisest? And I want you to think about that carefully, because there's a couple different ways you could answer it. But when it comes to battle tactics and what it takes to fight in a war, in a battle, do you think David was the wisest of him between him and Goliath? I would say no. Now, we could answer that question and say yes, because David trusted in God. That's true. I'm just looking at it from life under the sun, from a strategic, battle-ready kind of mindset. Goliath was torso and head above David. Probably a lot more than that, but I don't know. But he was way ahead of him in that. He was way stronger than he was. He had everything except for the Lord. And David trusted in that, and so David was victorious. But it happens in real life. Armies go against each other, and you think, this army is going to just smote this other one and wipe the earth with them. And then it's the underdog ends up winning. It's not the strongest. It's not the wisest or the one with the best weaponry and military who ends up being victorious. And the statement in Ecclesiastes in this passage in the ESV is, but time and chance happen to them all. I pulled up the NET. I actually wrote it down in my answer. But I was just reading it from the NET when I was reading each of those different things. For time and chance may overcome them all. Again, they're similar. And I asked the question, how do we reconcile a passage like this, time and chance happen to them all, with passages like Daniel 4, verse 35? Anybody remember what that verse is about? It's during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar.
Isn't that when he brags about, about building everything or something?
Yes, he brags about his kingdom. Look at what my great might and wisdom have accomplished for this kingdom. Look at everything I've done. And it's when God humbles him and makes him like a beast of the field for a period of time. But Daniel makes the statement, multiple times in that context. One of them's 4:35, in saying that God does what? What? He does as he wishes. He raises up rulers and he tears them down. So when Nebuchadnezzar was victorious, who's responsible for that? When Nebuchadnezzar ended up falling to the Persians, who's responsible for that? I mean, God is able to do all of those things. So does it sound like there's anything that escapes his notice? Sound like there's anything that he cannot have his hand in? Then there's Ephesians 1:11, which I think deals with the idea of foreordained or being predestined. And again, the concept or the idea is God foreknows things and God makes sure that his will is accomplished. So how do we reconcile passages like that with passages like this? I mean, time and chance happen to them all. What does that sound like? Yeah, I mean, we could describe it as coincidences. We could describe it as, well, you know, there was really no reason for that. It just happened. In fact, we make statements like that. Well, you know, I was on my way and this just happened. And we use that for a whole lot of different things. So I want us to start there on Sunday, but go ahead and get questions for chapter 10, because after we work on that passage for a little while, hopefully, we can move on into chapter 10 and talk about it a little bit. I also want to talk a little bit about verse 17. But I really want to talk about this idea of time and chance happen to them all, or time and chance overtake them or overcome them all, and just try to reconcile that idea with these other passages in our minds and how we deal with that. So appreciate your help tonight. We'll start there on Sunday, Lord willing.